But yeah, today is not so content heavy, so just wanted to give you guys a really good introduction to who I am, how we go about the work that we do, and how everything kind of started. So it's actually pretty fun. But yeah, I'm Joe Pitawanakut from Wiki, and I teach about plant medicine. I'm really happy, really grateful for this opportunity too. Like, it was just put right in my lap. The way that it all kind of started was super cool, because I went my whole academic career, like, I'll tell you guys right off the bat, when I was in high school, I was real bad. I grew up in Wiki, and it wasn't so bad, but there's a reputation there. I have a real good family though, and really good support. And when I said that I don't want to go to high school in Wiki, my parents were like right on board, and I got to go to Chiging, MSS, Manitoulin Secondary School, and there was real cool, because it was like I didn't know anybody. It was all new, and like I had a brand new, like, just clean slate. No one was gonna bother me, and then I'm like 13 or something like this, however old you are when you go to high school. I started working with my uncle in the bush, hauling logs, and then so I started to have muscles for the first time, and I was like, wow. And then this whole new beginning at MSS, and then it ended up being, I was real bad though, and just going nowhere fast. And so I had a real cool experience when one of my trips, my grade 12 trip, there was a project that we could go to Costa Rica, and like every teacher that knew who I was, like, really didn't want me to go. Like, they did everything so that I couldn't, that I wasn't allowed. And but I fought my way through, went to all the fundraisers, and my parents, just threw down, like, however much it costed. It was crazy. And then I got to go to Costa Rica, and then whole bunch of really amazing things happened over there. I got to meet some of the indigenous people down there, and that was honestly like the first time that I ever got to realize that that I'm indigenous. And I was like, hey, these guys are native down here. They speak their language. This guy like fasts all the time, and I was like, hey, that'd be awesome if I could, I should be doing that kind of stuff. And when we got back, I was sharing with my grandma. I was always really close with my grandma. And so I was sharing her everything that happened. And then that's one of the things she said. It just caught me off guard. She said, well, you should fast. And then I remember me and my dad were like, whoa, really? You think? Because I was never involved in my culture. My parents are both fluent speakers though, and so I was really lucky to have that. But no culture really. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, well, I'll test it out, see what this fasting thing is all about. And then that's where it started. I did my fast a couple days. It was real awesome. 4 days, 4 nights, typical. And then, but I was still pretty bad though. Like up until that point, I was a real bad kid. And then, so I was failing everything. Like in school, my whole academic career was just garbage, and like begging everyone to pass me. Then I remember even multiple times saying, you know what? You should just let me pass because you don't want to see me next year. You don't want to have me again. You should just let me go. And then so yeah, doing stuff like that, and I ended up failing in grade 12, failing a couple courses, and so I ended up moving to Kitchener alone to finish my high school victory lap by myself, and then I was faced with like this another new beginning, and when I started school. And rather than, being real bad again, I realized that I kind of had something to offer. Some of my peers were seeing that I was interesting, and that Indigenous people, we have this reputation to be. Like, I don't know, there's some sort of mysticism around us, and and so I saw my peers were attracted to that, and rather than being bad, I sort of embraced it and shared as much as I could about what I know about who we are. Then I started realizing, hey man, this is pretty awesome. I kind of like this. I like this identity, and once I started falling into that, I finished my high school, and then I moved back home, and I still barely passed everything. And like I was still bad in school, but I did pass, and I did apply to post-secondary because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And no one would accept me though, because of my grades were too low. And then I ended up getting into a school for classical guitar for a college. But it wasn't because of my grades. That faculty had to pull a whole bunch of strings because I was real good. And so he's like, you have to, never mind the grades, I'll get you in. And he did what he could to get me in. So it was like my last opportunity to make it in school. And yeah, it was for music. And then what happened that summer is I knew I was going to school in the fall. I had to smarten up, and so I got a job at Debaj Magic in Mantoning on Manitoulin, and I would bike to work because I had no vehicle or anything like this. I would just bike to work, and then I met this girl over there, and I was like, oh, who's that? And then we started hanging out and going out into the bush. I was showing her all of the most beautiful spots on the res, and I wanted to show her my family because I have like a really amazing family. Like we hunt, we fish, we all have big gardens, and there's a lot of knowledge there, and I wanted her to see my family so that she'll see how awesome we are, and so that she'll stick around. And then but see, I'm learning about all of this culture, I'm learning my language, I'm fasting, doing all this stuff, and then I bring this girl around. Bright blonde hair, blue eyes, this like a non-indigenous person, and then my family is thinking he finally has his life under control, and then they see her and they're like, hey, well, we're gonna take all this away, and so there was like not hostility, but I remember we made ourselves scarce pretty quick. And but I knew too, because I wanted her to understand that my family is amazing. There's lots of knowledge here, and so I said, there's a person. She won't judge. She'll bring you in, and she'll just give you a big hug and be accepting and whatever. That was my grandma. So I was like, come see my grandma. She's real cool. She has all kinds of really amazing stories. And so, we go and visit my grandma all the time. And my wife is the one that really started to catch on to some of these themes. Because for me, I just wanted my wife to know that we're awesome. So I would get my grandma to tell all of the most awesome stories. And they all just like, they all had to do, my favorite idea was that my grandma had no hospital. She was raised with no access to the hospital. It was in Mantuaning, but that's like, 20 kilometers away. There's no cars yet. And if you get injured or if you get sick, everybody was like, we're not going to go over there. We don't even get treated good anyways. Plus you have to get past the Indian agents. So and everyone was like, I'm not going to go over there. And so she had no hospital. So my grandma grew up always having to know what medicines to use, what plants to use to help fix different problems. And it was real awesome because like that's the stories I would always get her to tell my wife. Like the first one, my favorite one is when my uncle, I have two uncles, they're real bad too. And they're real shingus, real mischievous and close in age, and so partners in crime. And my grandma, she said, yeah, you know what? When we were sitting down with my wife, I said, can you tell her the story about Baguio? And she smiles, oh, okay. And my grandma says, yeah, well, where we were living, she just gestures out her window, like where I was raising my family, because it was like just right there. She said there was a giant barn in the back. The whole barn burnt down, and it was just rubble and a bunch of massive nails, and so very dangerous. And it was like, so don't play over there. That was a rule. And my uncles, they're like just taller than the grass, like little kids, and but they were bad. So that was their favorite spot to play. And they're playing tag, and then I guess one of my uncles, he's running, and then he looked back, and then he saw his brother's foot go right on a nail. And then I guess the way it is described is that there's an open shoe and the nail poked through his foot, but not all the way through, but he could see the top of his foot getting pushed up by the nail. It didn't go all the way through, so he pulled off of his, sorry if you're eating dinner, but he pulled off his foot, and then just crying. And then all these jokes always made of, he wasn't crying because his foot hurt, but because of the reaction that he's gonna have from his mom. He was scared of his mom. And then so he's my uncle, he's carrying his brother, and nice, real bloody. And my grandma, she was hanging clothes on the line, and then she could hear crying coming right from where the barn was. So once they came around the corner, she's hanging clothes on the line. Hey, you were playing where you're not supposed to. And then he's crying, yes! And she just keeps hanging clothes on the line. And she says, well, what happens when you do that? And she said, you might die. And so she kept putting clothes on the line, and he was there, little boy, thinking that he's gonna die, all blood coming out of his foot or whatever. And then she just kept putting clothes on the line, because what she understands as a parent, all of you parents will be able to understand this immediately. The punishment, if you are ever to punish children, the punishment is not actually the punishment. It's the anticipation period. That's the most devastating part. What is gonna happen? And you levy that as a parent. You're like, okay, well, maximize this anticipatory period and make this as effective of a therapy as possible. And so she just kept putting clothes on the line. And she said, oh, what if you can't make it to the hospital? And he's just crying away. And so what he did, what my grandma did, she said, it's best from my uncle's perspective. He said he was just watching her, and she just leaned back and she grabbed spruce gum, Baguio, we call it, look Baguio, this resin. and she starts working with it because it's like really hard Play-Doh, and you have to keep like massaging it until it gets nice and soft and tacky. And then she took his sock off and just put that spruce gum on his foot, wrapped it up, and said, well, we'll go to the hospital tomorrow or the next day, or whenever it's convenient. And the worry is that tetanus, right? The bacteria, you do not want to get tetanus. No one is vaccinated, and so you could die, and usually it's pretty quick. So they were worried, and I guess a day or two goes by, and then they go to the hospital, and she walks into the hospital, and the doctor is looking and seeing what the story is. Stepped on a nail a couple days ago, and then he's kind of looking at my uncle like, oh, no fever, no nothing. Oh, when did you step on this nail? Oh, a couple days ago. Oh, well, if it was tetanus, you'd have been dead by now. So let's check it out anyway. So he took the bandage off, and then it was real cool because like spruce gum, it's not the most beautiful looking thing. It looks pretty gross. And so, but it smells real good. So like there's gestures, like, what his foot smells pretty good. And then then when he saw the spruce gum, just like, yuck, like what the heck is this? What am I supposed to do with this? And then he took it off, and he was looking inside of my uncle's foot and the spruce gum. And my grandma, my uncle, the spruce gum, and he was like, what is this stuff? And then he was looking in the foot, and he was like, he said, even if it wasn't tetanus, like even if there was no tetanus, the shards from the charred wood and the flakes of rust that should have been all inside of his foot, it would have created such a nasty infection, it probably would have just chopped it off. Like if you'd have had an amputation. He said, this is the cleanest cut I've ever seen. And in just a couple days, the Dr. Bailey there was just freaking out. And so he was like, this, he said, then he looked at my grandma and he just put that spruce gum back on and wrapped it up. And he was like, you keep doing whatever you're doing. You obviously know better than me. And then my grandma was just like, oh, yeah, okay, well. See, you just don't really need the hospital after all. Just going home, and just like stuff like that. So because of stories like that, I did grow up having spruce gum in the house, but my mom is a nurse, and so she would have so much fun with peroxide and the bubbles and the gauze rubbing and and all of this stuff, Bactroban or whatever. But I always remember there being some spruce gum in the bathroom. We just never really used it. We remembered the stories, And so when I met my wife, like that's all of the craziest thing for me is that my grandma had no hospital, and so I would always make her tell my wife all of those sorts of stories, and my wife sort of took it as like, oh, Joe really likes plants. And but like I don't know, I couldn't I didn't really understand it that way. I could care less about plants. These stories are crazy. So yeah, I mean, my wife thought I was interested in plants, and then we were doing this for quite a while, and then I started school. So I was in Sudbury at school, and failing everything again. Just being real bad in school. And what happened was my wife, just wanted to support me, and so she got me a book. Spruce gum. There you go in the chat there. But yeah, my wife got me a book, just an identification book, like a field ID book, and it was all about edible and medicinal plants of Canada or something. And so I go through this book, and I was real interested because, like, it's all stuff my grandma knows already. In the book, it'll tell you edible significance, whether the plant is used as medicine. And obviously, if a plant is used as medicine, the book will say, Cree people or Jibwek will use this plant for this problem. And I was going through like, oh, my grandma already knows all this stuff. What the heck? And it was really cool when I would see some research being done on the plant. So like these plants would go through universities or something like this, and they would study it to first of all verify the use, if the Indians were right, and then they would try to create different drugs that mimic the plant. And some of these studies are like millions of dollars they're spending to figure this stuff out. So I thought this was super significant. So I go back to my grandma like, hey, you know what? These guys spend like millions of dollars to try to figure out stuff you already know. And then she's like, oh yeah, don't worry about that. I don't know nothing. I didn't even go to grade 2 and my mom is the one who knew all this medicine. I was too busy climbing trees and playing and being a kid. But we were like, oh man, no way. She knows so much. And once we knew that she had something special, like after going through some of these books and seeing some of this research, really knew she had something special. So I was kind of like, okay, well, we have to learn more here. We have to dedicate time to this. And then my real bad side started to come out again, because I was failing everything in school. And then H1N1, remember like the swine flu was like outbreak in Ontario, and so I was like, okay, I gotta levy this so my parents don't get mad at me. Swine flu, I don't want to die. And oh, never mind school anyways. I'll learn medicine from your mom. And I had it all planned out. That's what I did. I left school because I didn't want to die from swine flu, and I promised to learn from my grandma. And this is what was really fun. So I'll share with you guys a couple things here. I just dropped right out of school, and then dedicating everything to her. Me and my wife were always there, and my grandma, she would just describe the way some of these plants looked, and then she would tell us how it's used. And the more time we spent with her, me and my wife were like, we should go and find some of these medicines and give them to people. Like, it sounds like we need it. And so once we decided, like, let's find these plants, that's when it got real fun. Because my grandma would play all these games like hey, let's make a medicine for old people as we get old. And my grandma says, well, what's specifically? I was thinking like, well, bone problems. Let's help. When you get old, you wear metal cleats because you don't want to slip on the ice because you'll break bones and stuff. Maybe we could help with that. Help all of our old people, and so that we could learn from everybody. And she says right away, she was like, okay, yeah. Let's make that. Let's make a medicine help make your bones nice and strong. So this is our sort of knowledge acquisition piece. This is how we learned. My grandma would just describe what it is. She would say, okay, you have to go get gazibinashk. Oh, gazibinashk. Okay. What's that in English? And my grandma's like, I don't think it has an English name. Because all we ever call it is kasibnashk. Those are our medicine. I don't think they have English names. And so I realized, dang, there's a little bit of an issue here. So I was like, okay, well, can you just describe the way that it looks then? And describe kasibnashk. And so she says, oh, okay, it's green. And What else about it? There's little black lines. There's little black lines on it. Oh, this is not very. What shape are the leaves? There are no leaves. Oh, what? What about a flower? What color is the flower? There's no flower. Well, what the heck is it? And she says it's just like one stick, just like one little limb poking out of the ground. That's what it is. And there's no flower, no leaves, just little black lines, and it's straight. And I was like, I don't know what the heck she's talking about. So me and my wife, rather than prying and not making my grandma feel like, that she's not doing a good job, me and my wife were just like, okay, let's go get it. And we would just drive and walk for months to try and find the different plants that my grandma was talking about. So here we are, me and my wife, trying to find Scouring rush, Gazebinashk. Here, Equisedum hymali. This is one of my favorite medicines to sort of learn about first. So I'll put it in the chat for you guys. But yeah, she says we're cruising around trying to find Gazebinashk. Can't find it anywhere. Don't know how to find this plant. And then it was winter. And then me and my wife are like trying to find, we're still learning about medicine. I had to go to Chiging for something. And I remember my grandma, she tries to get us to find these plants, and she'll give us as much context as she can. And so her context for Gazebinashk, she says, it doesn't even grow here. It grows like in Chiging. Me and my mom would walk to Chiging to go and pick it because there's not enough in Wiki. And Chiging, that's like 70 kilometers away. So they would just walk. And when she was like a little girl, like 5 or 6, and her mom was like in her late 60s or something like that. And so they go on these huge walks and just to go get that one medicine. And so I had like a little bit of idea. So here I am, months later, I'm in Chiging. I'm trying to I'm trying to go to like work or something. And, but I had to pee real bad. My wife is driving me and I'm like, you gotta pull over right. I could see where I had to go. The building was right there. I was like, you can pull over right here. It's Cross Hill Road. And I was like, I gotta go. And so I ran up on top of the hill. There's like a skidoo trail that goes on the side of the road. And so I didn't sink in the snow. There was a little bit of snow. And then, I saw, so it was peeing. Sorry, again, if you're eating supper. But what happened was I melted all of the snow around this plant. And I'll share with you guys what that plant looks like. Just this guy right here. Gazebinashk, Scouring rush, Equisedum hymali. I was peeing. And then I melted all the snow around this plant, and I was like, hey, look at that. That fits the description. There's no leaves, there's no flowers, there's no nothing. It's just one green stick with black lines. And so, I didn't grab the one that I uncovered. I reached behind me. I sort of saw, like, you could see little tips of this plant poking on top of the snow, like everywhere. So I grabbed a couple handfuls. I don't even think we went to our job. I just turned around right there and we went back home to show my grandma. And then so here we are showing my grandma this medicine. And we just came onto the porch and she looked through the window and she was like, she was already saying, yes. And then she would come out onto the deck and meet us and then grab that plant, first time in like 50 years. She would grab that plant and say, this is the one. This is Gazebinashk. And so so we found it. And then once we knew what it was, it's kind of like when you hear a word for the first time and you're like, psh, I've never heard this word in my life. And then like that afternoon you hear it like another 24 times. You're like, what the heck? Go from never hearing this word to all the time? This is crazy. So same thing if you're when we started to find medicine, we'd find one, see it, and my grandma would positively identify it, say, that's the one. And then me and my wife would see it everywhere. And we would pick a whole bunch, make some for my grandma, or we would have some for ourselves. But what started happening though is we started doing this process with a whole bunch of our different medicines. My grandma would tell us bone medicines and kidney medicine, heart medicine, lung medicine, all these stuff. And we would find the plants. My grandma would identify it, and we'd say, okay, I know where this is. And we would just map out our community where it all was growing. And then this may be my bad part creeping in again. What I did is I would just start giving it to people. I would just give people this medicine and just see what happens. University now, because I found myself back in academia, called this unethical. But that was our process, and it could seem like it's real bad, I just give people plants and just be like, wait to see what happens, see what happens. And but really what I was doing is I was just reuniting us with medicine that we should have always had anyways. And so what would happen usually is that a lot of the people we would take this medicine to already knew what it was, and they already knew the name of it. They knew how to prepare it. They watched their grandparents make this medicine for so-and-so when they were 5 years old. And so they would just take the medicine at the door and disappear into their house. And they would just say, thank you. And like real old school. Take all that medicine. And so I just started giving medicine away to everybody because what happened, like with this one, Kasibnashk, when we started picking it, giving it away, people would be coming up to us and they're like, thanks for bringing me to Kasibnashk. I'm much better now. So we're like, what do you mean much better? And they'll just say, well, my doctor said I don't have osteoporosis anymore. My bones are nice and strong. Oh, like you're drinking that medicine for like a month. How does that kind of work? And so like this medicine we were giving away to everybody, it had a positive effect. It was working pretty well. And so kind of like, this is pretty cool. But I wanted to know more. I wanted to know like what's actually happening. And so I remember one situation where one community member, I gave this woman a bunch of this medicine, and she agreed to. I said, tell me what your numbers are, because when you do a bone density test, 0 is the weakest and 100 is the strongest, and 20 below is when you get diagnosed with osteoporosis. So maybe when you're with your doctor, ask them what your score is. And with the one lady in particular, she came back at us quite a few weeks later, and she says, I got my results back from my bone density test. And one thing about the scale for bone density is like some parts of your body, like I think your wrists, certain parts of your spine, or maybe the whole spine, the way that we measure bone density is a little bit weird. Like your wrist and your spine, we measure like only from 0 to -5, and 0 is the strongest and -5 is the weakest. So it's a little bit funky, but generally 0 to 100 is where everybody is. 100 is the strongest. And she says, yeah, my results came back and my doctor said that I have the strongest bones I've ever had in my life. And she had like 9 kids or 10 kids. So it is really significant for her. I don't have osteoporosis anymore. And I was like, whoa, it's actually a pretty big deal. She was scoring between 7 and 10, which is like pretty bad osteoporosis. And so I asked her, what was your actual score? And she was like, oh, this is funny because my doctor, he didn't believe it. He said there has to be something wrong. And then I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. And the doctor showed her what her actual score was, 137. And he said, I looked through all of the records, and this is the highest bone density score that the Manitoulin Health Center has ever recorded before, 137. He said, you have stronger bones than both my kids combined. And he was a doctor. So then I was listening to her on the phone, like, whoa, this is crazy. And when we started, like, we thought, okay, well, there's something really, really special about this plant. Let's really start, like, giving this out. So we were just like Oprah, just giving this stuff all like crazy, making sure everybody had gsivnoshk, you get gsivnoshk, and everybody had this medicine. And we started getting all these real awesome results. People were like, yeah, I scored over 120, or I scored over 115. And they had all these crazy results, and for taking Scouring Rush for a very short amount of time. And so, like, I knew that this was something awesome. And what we started to do then was, word started to spread around in our community that we're finding medicine and we're giving it away. And so I turned into this little provider of medicine. I was always picking it and giving it away to people. And I had so much fun doing that. The other communities, surrounding communities, started to realize that this is what I was doing, and there was an impact. And at that same time, my community started to ask us to teach how to find these medicines, teach how to make it. So I started teaching, a couple big groups here and there in my community. Just this little boy who used to be real bad. And then I'm teaching about medicine. It was real weird, real awkward. And then other communities started to say, hey, he's teaching now. Come teach that over here. Then I realized, there's this really huge need and yearning to understand as much as we can about plant medicine. Started teaching in communities all over. Then, we were getting paid to do it too. So, and welfare, or Ontario Works, was just taking away all that money. So then we were finally like, hey, we could get off of OW. And once we got off assistance, then it was like, wow, this is so cool. And then we could buy a vehicle, and then it sort of evolved into this, business, I guess. But I was just teaching about medicine all over, and so what I did is start to use all of those stories from Wikwemkong, from my community, and say, this is what happened to all these people. Because remember, I just give them tea and say, okay, let's see what happens. And then I was getting all these real awesome stories, and then so I'd share those stories with the other communities, and then by the time I was going to another community, I would I'm obsessed with my follow-up. I always make sure, see how everybody is doing, all of the participants, and so I'd get more stories every time I would go to a community. I would get all their stories of what happened to them when they used medicine. And so that's what I was obsessed with for so long. All the stories, that anecdote was just growing and growing and growing. And now, now especially, but like pre-COVID, we were working with over 100 different Indigenous communities in Ontario, and like over 150 different institutions every year, just going everywhere, collecting, telling and collecting all of these really amazing stories. But one thing that happened super early on, one of the things that we'll be really focused on for like every one of these sessions is the real process. The one thing that I'm super obsessed with is learning why, how. Because I was like, this is ridiculous. How can I give people this tea and then this is what happens? These are chronic diseases. How is this happening? It seemed fake. I felt like a wizard, and I wanted to figure out like exactly what was happening, and so it was perfect because my mom, she's a registered nurse, and one thing about my mom is that, well, she's a really, really good nurse, and she's like obsessively continuing her education, and like she went back to school for massage therapy to gain a deeper understanding of bodily tissue and stuff like this. But because her continuous education is so strong, she was always correcting her profs. She'd take me to school with her, and yeah, she'd have to be like, sir, no, that's you're wrong. And so like my mom is real awesome, and when we were just giving medicine away to people, and like she said, you could hurt somebody. Like just being like real with me, like, what if you kill somebody? You don't know what you're doing. Like, what if they're on warfarin or Coumadin? What if they're on blood pressure medication? What if they're on this? What if they're doing that? Like, you don't know what the medication what medication is doing and what the plant is doing. This is reckless. And so I was like, well, but it's a real simple answer. All I got to do is learn what the medication is doing, learn what the plants are doing, and see if it's okay. So then I started to become obsessed with learning about how a plant works, learning a plant's mechanism of action, what all of those chemicals are and what they do inside of your body, how the medicine accomplishes what it does. And because I really, one of the things that I wanted to accomplish is because I saw, like, at the time when me and my mom were having these discussions, there was a famous case in Ontario, and so yeah, well, I mean, it was fear-based, but yeah, it was really cool because like when we were having these discussions, there was a famous case where a young girl died, ended up passing away because what was happening is she was going through treatment from her physician, and she started to take traditional medicine. The doctor doesn't understand what the plants are doing, so the doctor withdraws treatment, and then a lot of people, when this happens, they end up dying. And so these tragic stories are popping up all over, and I was like, everybody's all freaking out about what's happening, but really all we need to do is learn what the plants are doing, so then tell the doctor and when everything is okay, and if there are problems with these two medicines working together. So I was becoming obsessed, with learning about learning all of the science so that I could tell. And what I was learning is that our medicine is actually super safe, and they work really well together. If you're just looking at it with plain view, these two practices should work very well together. And so that's what we started to teach. And encourage, and communities create these really amazing integrative programs, some of which you're exposed to here. But that's my favorite thing to learn, exactly how a plant works. It also helps us understand the disease, why it happens, how it happens. And so what's going to happen here is, like, every time we're focusing on a disease or focus on a medicine, we're going to break it all down so that it's absolutely crystal clear what the medicine does, how it works, and so we have a very good understanding of the disease, how it works, and one thing that I will share real quick is that when I talk about this partnership between pharmaceutical industry, or doctors, or physicians, and and plant medicine, what we're going to be really just hammering into you every one of these sessions is that plant medicine, from my understanding so far, is that it's a master at giving your body the ability to prolong or prevent the onset of chronic disease as late as possible. And chronic disease is what will kill us eventually. Chronic disease is all-cause mortality. It's what will eventually remove us from this world. What we're experiencing now is that chronic disease is coming sooner and sooner, earlier and earlier, younger and younger, and so plant medicine, that's what it's really, really good at, is giving your body everything that it needs to be able to prevent those diseases from starting as long and as late as possible. Western medicine, health sciences, is an absolute master at giving your body the ability to live with chronic disease for as long as possible. So one is prophylactic, one prevents sickness, and one really helps to give you the ability to live with sickness as long as possible and as comfortable as possible. So prevent sickness for as long as possible and then live with it for as long as possible. This is a perfect partnership. We should be working together. And so that's the gap that I'm just obsessively trying to bridge. And one of the things that we focus on so much is this idea of contraindication when a medication doesn't work well with a plant. And so one of them that I could actually share with you guys right now, because you probably are wondering how you prepare it, how do you make this medicine? Teach me more about Gsibnashk. So let's look at this Gsibnashk for a second. Scouring rush. One of the things that we need to understand right away, one of the things that we have to understand right away is that the Latin name, scientific name, is super important. Scientific taxonomy of plants. I always want to stress to anybody and absolutely everybody, we need to learn what all of their names are. All of these different plants, we need to learn what all of their names are. They're super important. Nishnaba names, Nishnaba Nosunan, you're going to get, they teach you about all different things, relationships and connections that this plant has with other creatures. Sometimes their uses and tastes and even sometimes sounds that they make are embedded into the one Nishnaba name, and so it makes a whole experience, or you're able to develop an experience with this plant just by learning the Nishnaba name. It's really beautiful the way that it happens. The Latin name, scientific name, the reason why this whole system exists, scientific taxonomy of plants, the naming of plants, is to ensure proper identification, so that if you're talking to somebody, you will know you're talking about that exact species. So the Latin name is super important because you're never going to be wrong. You slap that into Google, you're going to get only that plant. And unless Google steers you wrong. Google grandma is not as accurate as grandma. But sometimes, the common names as well, they're super fun. So just Elder Google, the thing that we need to understand, how this is so important. Gsibnashk, scouring rush, is a really amazing plant to be able to share this with. So super quick, just the Nishnaba name, Gsibnashk. When I started picking it, I started to realize that this plant was always beside a river or a creek, and I was like, well, in Nishnaba language, Zibe is a river or a creek. Zibe, Gsibnashk. Must mean like river plant or something. So when I told my grandma's like a huge language Nishnaba language consultant in our community, so for our family as well. And when I went over there, I was like, hey, I know why it's called Gsibnashk. And she says, oh, why? And she says, I said, well, it's because it's always beside a river or a creek, like every time. And she says, oh, I never thought of that before. So I said, well, what were you thinking then? How do you understand this? And she's like, well, one time my mom was sneaking up behind me on the porch. I could hear her walking and it sounded like she was holding something, and she could think in the back of her head, like, is my mom sneaking up on me? This is unusual. And so what had happened is her mom had a big bundle of this plant. It was dry. One thing you'll notice about this plant is that it's hollow, and the outside of the plant is ribbed. You can see all those little ridges, vertical ribs, and the outside of the plant. One thing that makes this plant, Ecosidium hyemale, unique is that it deposits a bunch of silica into the outermost layer of the plant. Silica is a hard abrasive crystal that we use to make glass, and it's in sand. That's why it's always beside a river. It's because that's where there's a lot of silica for the plant to be able to put in the outside. And so you take this plant hollow, bunch of glass in the outside. When it's dry, it makes a super loud sound. And so her mom was sneaking up on her and rubbed all these dry plants together, and it was like just a bunch of shards of glass and hollow stems, and it sounded like a scream. My grandma stood up and started running, and then she was turned around and she's like huffing and puffing, looking at her mom, and her mom is laughing at that plant, and she said, and then that's what she said, scream. A sinoe is a scream. So kasi benashk, that's why we call it that, because it screams, a sinoe. And so it's also like the same word we use to describe foxes. When foxes scream, even there's a last name, a sinoe, that's a sinoe is a scream. Or if you put a green log in a fire and it makes that high-pitched whining sound, a sinoe. So that scream sound, so the plant tells you where it grows and a sound that it makes. So I went to my plant expert in Wiki, and he's a language expert as well. So I was telling them this is two meanings in the same word. So I tell him, oh yeah, so it tells you where it grows and what it sounds like. And he says, I never thought of that before. And I was like, you know plants, you know language, what do you think? And he's like, well, I just always thought, because he drinks it all the time, he's like, well, I just thought it's describing the way that it tastes. And so kasiu bagan is something that's sour. Kasiu, so like kasiu bak is rhubarb for that sour, makes your mouth pucker taste. And so kasiu bagan is that sour taste. Kasiu benashk, that's what we're talking about. It tastes sour, which the tea does. If you make tea, you throw a bunch of it in some hot water, let it steep. When you put it in your mouth thinks that it tastes sweet. And so you swallow it right away. And you're like, But then there's a sour twist in your mouth. And you're like, hey, what the heck? And that sour little zing, it makes you want to put more of the sweet stuff in your mouth. And every time you swallow it, you need to put more in. So I usually end up drinking this tea real fast. And I was real happy that this plant tells you where it grows, what it sounds like, the taste that it has. So I went to the language committee in my community. It did like a little presentation for them, showing them this. And they wanted to know, why is it called scouring rush? And I said, well, it's called scouring rush because the outside of the plant is full of silica. It's a hard abrasive crystal that's sandpaper. We take a bunch of silica, glue it on a piece of paper, and that's sandpaper. So you use this. This is the scouring pad, scouring rush. Before the industrialization of steel wool after World War I, this was the scouring pad. And so one lady was like, she knew right away, and she came up to me and she looked mad. I thought I did something wrong. I was like, oh, hopefully I didn't offend somehow. And she says, yeah, how does your dad tell you to have a shower? And I was like, she must know my dad. Gazibigdia. And she says, what does that mean? Gazibigdia, clean your bum. And then when you tell somebody to clean themselves, like just have a shower, clean yourself. So, but she's asking like, what does that mean? And I was like, I don't know, clean soap. And she says, no, how does your dad tell you to do the dishes? Clean the dishes. So what does that mean? She says, I don't know what you're getting at. I was saying, and she says, gzibi means to scrub something, wipe something. So when he says gzibigdi, he's telling you to scrub your butt. in the shower so you don't stink. And when he's telling you to have a clean the dishes, scrub all those plates down so that they are clean. And then I was like, oh, scouring rush. It's what we use to scrub stuff. And so it's like, the Anishinaabe name tells you where it grows, what it sounds like, a taste that it has, utilitarian purpose, and probably even more I don't even realize. So learning the Anishinaabe name of plants is super important. Like every single one that we talk about, we will do this in great detail. It'll be super fun. But but yeah, learning names is super important. One of the reasons why we need to understand Equisetum hyemale, understand the Latin name, the identification of the plant, is because there's another one. Equisetum arvens is a field horsetail. So everyone will look at the scouring rush and say, hey, that's a horsetail, eh? Technically not. It's a rush. Horsetails is going to have fringes coming out of each section, each node, that actually make it look like a horsetail. And so Equisetum arvens is a European plant. It's an invasive species. And one thing that we need to remember, just from here on, I'll tell you guys like over and over again, we'll cover safety profile of every single plant. The reason why Latin names is so important is because you're going to get Equisetum hyemale, you're going to get the scouring rush, the proper one. Equisetum arvens has nicotine inside of it. And when you consume nicotine orally, it's hard on your liver, it's hard on your kidneys, and it doesn't work well with a lot of medications. So field horsetail, you cannot, we shouldn't be using it, because we can't use it like if we're on different types of, especially hormones. The nicotine is really going to disrupt if you rely on like TSH or like a thyroid medication. The nicotine is really going to disrupt that. It's going to be taxing on your liver. And your liver enzymes are going to be out of whack. Your doctor is going to get nervous. The field horsetail is not really the one that we should be using. It's Equisetum hyemale, the scouring rush, the one that's in the picture. No fringes, just one stick poking out of the ground. And this one, absolutely no nicotine, no nothing. Like all it is just all of the therapeutic potential. With no barriers in place. That's one of the things that makes the Great Lakes special is that the medicinal species of plants that we have here don't have this guard or barrier in the way to help you, to prevent you from accessing the therapeutic potential, the medicine. The plants here just offer their medicine with no barriers. And it's why when you look at drug discovery, when a pharmaceutical company wants to create a different drug, create a new drug, they look to plants. Over 85% of every drug that has been discovered comes from plants. And when we hear that, we think of like the Amazon and the jungle and Australia and TCM or traditional Chinese medicine. But the reality is that plants from other places around the world seem to have these barriers that prevent access. In the Great Lakes, we do not. So the great partnership here was when we're looking at most of the drugs that have been discovered, most of them come from the Great Lakes, come from our plants, come from our medicine. And one of the most beautiful things that I'm really happy to be able to share with you guys every time we get to hang out is that a lot of the drugs that we use from the doctor, from shoppers, from the pharmacy, come from our come from our medicine. And sometimes we can look at this as an opportunity then to go to the source of where all of these drugs come from. And one of the things is that a lot of these medications are not able to accomplish what the plant does. But it does good enough to sell. But our medicine, the shamanskike, it does what it's supposed to do. and it does that really well. And so we have this opportunity then, to go to the source of where this medicine industry comes from in the first place. And when we do that, we're able to get that much closer to the life that this land is able to provide for us, the Great Lakes region. It's able to give us something that we call bimadzoin, life. The root word of this bimadzoin is oadzoin, is knowledge. Oadzoin is knowledge, and it's my favorite thing to be able to share with you the shkikiadzoin, medicine knowledge, to give you the opportunity to go back to Ontario or to go back to the Great Lakes when we get sick or injured, to be able to achieve bimadzoin, or the life that this land is able to provide for us. So we'll do that with every single one of these medicines. Every time we have a session, we'll have a different focus. And I'm real excited. But that's basically, my whole process, my knowledge acquisition piece, my positionality piece. That's where I'm coming from. And so I just wanted to spend some time with you to be able to, so that we are, properly oriented. So